Our scripture reading for today is Ruth chapter 2, 4 through 17. Now behold, Boaz came from Bethlehem and said to the reapers, May Yahweh be with you. And they said to him, May Yahweh bless you. Then Boaz said to his young man, who was in charge of the reapers, whose young woman is this? The young man in charge of the reapers replied, She is a young Moabite woman who returned with Naomi from the fields of Moab. And she said, Please let me glean and gather after the reapers among the sheaves. Thus she came and has remained from the morning until now. She has been sitting in the house for a little while. Then Boaz said to Ruth, Have you not heard, my daughter? Do you not go to glean in another field? Furthermore, do not go on from this one, but stay here with my young women. Let your eyes be on the field which they reap, and go after them. Indeed, I have commanded the young men not to touch you. And if you are thirsty, go to the watering jars and drink from what the young men draw. Then she fell on her face, bowed to the ground, and said to him, Why have I found favor in your sight, that you should take notice of me, though I am a foreigner? Boaz replied to her, All that you have done for your mother-in-law after the death of your husband has been fully told to me, and how you forsook your father and your mother and the land of your birth, and came to a people that you did not previously know. May Yahweh fully repay your work, and may your wages be full from Yahweh, the God of Israel, under whose wing you have come to seek refuge. Then she said, May I find favor in your eyes, my Lord, for you have comforted me, and indeed have spoken to the heart of your servant woman, though I am not like one of your servant women. At mealtime, Boaz said to her, Come here, that you may eat of the bread and dip your piece of bread in the vinegar. So she sat beside the reapers, and he served her roasted grain, and she ate and was satisfied and had some left. Then she rose to glean, and Boaz commanded his young men, saying, Let her glean even among the sheaves, and do not dishonor her. Also, you shall purposely pull out for her some grain from the bundles, and leave it that she may glean, and do not rebuke her. So she gleaned in the field until evening, and then she beat out what she had, and gleaned, and it was about an ephah of barley.
Know that. But let's now turn ourselves to our passage. In this story, you could say is the beginning of boy meets girl kind of a thing, where Ruth gets to finally meet this man, Boaz, this man of excellence, as we learned earlier. And to this point, we've slowly get introduced to each character. You got to meet Naomi and her tragedy of she was married and had a husband and had some boys, and the husband dies, and her sons die, and she's left with these daughter-in-laws. And she has this tragic story, and she's now coming back, and she no longer wants to be called Naomi, but she wants to be called Mara. And then we got introduced to this woman, Ruth, this woman who is willing to stick with Naomi through thick and thin, and has this covenant hesed love for her mother-in-law. And now they've come back, and now we see there's a brighter light now. This dark time is now turning. Things are changing as Ruth meets this man, Boaz. Boaz is this man of excellence, this godly man. And this is a type of man that if you can have your daughters married, this is a guy you want them to marry. If you could have your sons grow up to be like Boaz, this is a type of young man you would want your son to be. To some degree, this sermon is about a godly man. And so we're going to look at this godly man as we continue our series in Family Redeemed in the book of Ruth, as we look at a sermon title, A Godly Man, and it's in Ruth 2, 4 through 17. Now, we're going to look at 7 characteristics of this godly man. Truly, there's more characteristics to a godly man than this, but these are 7 specific ones that define this man. And these are 7 qualities that us, particularly as men, we should want to hold. These are characteristics we should want to be like. These are what really makes a man. And you notice that none of it is about being tough or strong or boldly doing foolish things. It is a redefinition of what a man is, and it's not what we expect it to be. I think that's one of the things that's surprising, that's shocking. You're like, wait a minute, this is what a man was? But I thought it was what we saw in Hollywood. Isn't that what a man is? Isn't a man what we see in Tom Cruise and Top Gun? And no, it isn't. You know, what we have defined, what manhood in our society has been so twisted and so corrupted. And here we get this clear picture. This is what a godly man looks like. And as Bill mentioned, a godly man reflects the image of Christ. And so as we read the story about this godly man, may it encourage us, especially as the men. I wish this had landed on Father's Day. It just didn't happen to happen to us. But as men, let's contemplate how we can more able to model this character as we go through this. And not that this doesn't apply to you women. It does. A lot of these characters, but in particular, these are characters that as men, we want to model. So the first one, we'll go right into it because we've got a lot of passage. So Ruth, the first one is God honoring. A godly man is God honoring. And the first part says, now behold, Boaz came from Bethlehem. Now I'll stop there for a second. That means he was, Ruth, remember the first part too, Ruth has already come to the field. She's already at work. And now when it says, oh, behold, it's basically he's now arrived. And he's come from the city of Bethlehem, is now going to the field. That's all that is. Brief commentary there. But then it says, and said to the reporters, may Yahweh be with you. And it said, may Yahweh bless you. Now, I want to take a moment just real quick. A lot of your Bible says the capital L-O-R-D. And there used to be, in Hebrew, they would just have the consonants there. And what many Bible scholars believe is what it really should say there is Yahweh. And so in my Bible, you'll often hear me say Yahweh, and it's also related to the idea of I am, I exist. And so that's why when you hear me read my Bible, I'm always talking about Yahweh, and you'll hear Yahweh in this. So now it starts off with, may Yahweh be with you. Now this is a man who lives out his faith boldly, unapologetically. As Bill has said, could you imagine going to your work one day and your employer goes up to you, may Yahweh bless you, or maybe may Jesus bless you, and this says it all to his workers. And in fact, if I was in California and I had said that at a job, I would get kicked out quite quickly. But here, this man is bold with his faith. He declares his faith. And that is something we should want to do. As men, as people who are Christ, we should want our life to communicate our faith. Our faith is not something we are to keep private. It's not something to keep tucked away in your pocket or hidden, or, I hope no one asks me. Jesus said, he talked about, that when people ask you, you should be boldly declare what you believe. Don't be ashamed of me. If you're ashamed of me, I'll be ashamed of you. Our faith as Christians are to be bold like Boaz and say, may Yahweh be with you. And that characteristic, being bold and wearing his faith on his sleeve, doesn't just affect him, but affects everyone around him. And that's why his workers then respond, may Yahweh bless you. You see, when we live up our faith boldly and proclaim it, it affects people. And that is how people's life is transformed. And as men, we are to live out our faith, and it should affect people. And it has been said, if you want, and I've said this recently, if you want to affect the next generation, is actually if the father is a believer and leads his family to church, it's almost more guaranteed that the rest of the family will. If you reach the kids, it might affect the family. If you reach a mom, it might affect the kids. But if you get the father, and the father is a man who they see read his Bible, and they see him go praying, and they see him going to church, and is active in ministry, it affects the rest of the family. When you live out your faith, men, it affects the people around you. It affects your family, it affects your kids, it affects your friends, it affects your coworkers. Live out your life boldly, and you'll be amazed what God will do with that. Second of all, a leader. Boaz is a leader. Men, you are called to be leaders in your spheres of influence. Now, some of you might say, well, I'm not really a leader at work. I'm just a minion at my little job. But no, there's different spheres of influence where you can be a leader. Sometimes it's just being a leader of your family or being a leader of your children. But a godly man is a leader in his sphere of influence. And he's not just any kind of leader, but he is a leader who's a servant leader. And let's read the verse, actually. Then Boaz said to his young men, who was in charge of the reapers, whose young woman is this? Now, just imagine, employers now, imagine a CEO that owns a piece of a business. How often do you think they visit the company? Most of the time, not that often. But Boaz, as we'll see, is a man who gets in the dirt. He works with his employees. As long as he eats with his employees. This is a man who's actively involved in his business, and he is a servant leader. He leads by example. And even as we'll read, to a fact that he corrects some of his employees because he leads his men. And we need to be leaders. And not only is he a leader in that sense, but he's a leader in the fact that when something's out of place, in his field, it's like, who's she? I don't recognize her. Where is she from? He knows that. I mean, he doesn't see them as just, yeah, there's my servants out in the field. Okay, that's nice. No, the fact that he was able to point her out means he knew each one of his employees. He knew his servants. And as a leader, you need to know who you're in charge of. As leaders, we need to be effective. It's know who you're leading. Not only that, but about them. Who are they? What are they like? What is their family like? And if we're talking about in your family, it means you should know your wife. You should know your children. What's going on in their lives? Where's their hopes and dreams? You need to be aware of what's going on in your sphere influence if you're going to effectively lead. If all you do is you go to work and come back to work and you spend just a second with your family and go to bed and you wake up early and go again, you don't know your family and they don't know you. And if you're going to be an effective leader, you need to know what's going on, as we see this one. Now, it is interesting, he uses this interesting phrase, who's that young woman is this? And we're like, Pastor, well, is that a big deal? The term young woman is he's asking in that question, who does she belong to? I mean, is she, whose daughter is that? Whose wife is that? Or whose servant is that? He wants to know who about her. And it goes back to what he wants to learn about her. And it's that way if something happens, he can go to whoever is responsible for her. He wants to get to know her. And as we go through this, you see he actively gets to know people. As leaders, as men, we need to get to know our family, our children, those who are in our sphere of influence. We need to take a personal interest in them and not a passing interest in them. And not only that it is also interesting, he says young woman, it does denote that he was probably older than Ruth. See, it's not a new thing that young women marry old men or older men, and older men marry young women. It's, all the way back in Ruth, we still see there's an age thing. Must be something about maturity level. Not that I know anything about it, because me and my wife are the same age. I don't know if that says something about me or says something about, I don't know. Maybe bad discernment on her part, I don't know. But he takes notice of her, and there is hint. There are some scholars who do think that he is kind of like, wow, she's kind of nice, she's kind of attractive. Some believe that that's what he's trying to say with that. Or if she is married, it'd be like, okay, let's leave her alone. But if she isn't married, well, maybe it's something I want to look into. Just a thought. Verse 6 then says, so the young man in charge of the reapers says, she is a young Moabite woman who returned with Naomi from the fields of Moab. And she said, please let me glean and gather after the reapers among the sheaves. Thus she came and has remained for the morning until now, and she has been sitting in the house for a little while, which means there's probably have like a little shelter for you work hard, you get hot in the field, kind of like it's getting hot now, and you want to go inside, cool off before working. And so she's kind of hanging out there when he shows up. But it is interesting that when he asks this gentleman, which is probably like the foreman of his group, he kind of knows what's going on, and Boaz goes and says, you tell me what's going on. And it's interesting that this foreman mentions that she's a Moabite, and she came from Moab, and it's almost like he was overemphasizing, she's that foreigner who came with Naomi. There's some hint that there might be some prejudice that this foreman has towards Ruth. And in fact, there's later on hints that possibly, not only was it maybe with this foreman, but some of the other servants, because there is a hint that maybe they're giving her a hard time. Possibly, some people think it was possible because when you're gleaning behind someone, she should have been a little further back, but it says she was next to the sheaves, which might mean she was a little closer than what was, quote, what she was supposed to be doing. And maybe that was giving her a hard time. But that is the situation. But Boaz, as a good leader, is trying to figure out what's going on. And as we'll see later on, he is going to address this potential problem that's going on there, this prejudice that his servants and his foreman are having towards Ruth. Well, let's continue. So we learned that he's a leader, but now he is compassionate. Compassionate is a quality that men should have. We should be compassionate. Verse 8 says, then Boaz said to Ruth, have you not heard, my daughter? Do not go to glean in our field. Furthermore, do not go on from this one, but stay here with my young women. In this verse, we see the compassion of Boaz. An idea of compassion is mercy that leads to action. Compassion is mercy that leads to action. That you see someone in need and you do something about it. You want to think about the parable of the Good Samaritan. The Good Samaritan sees a Jew that's beat off the side of the road, and he has compassion, and he shows mercy, and he goes into action. And we see first that his compassion first is by calling her my daughter. Now, a lot of us don't understand it, but this is a term of endearment. We see this, Jesus does this with his disciples. Remember, he's on the shore, and he says, my children, or the disciples' children. It is a term, an endearment, a term of love and compassion. And this is a man who hears about her situation and has compassion for her. And he doesn't see her as a foreigner. He sees her as my daughter, as a woman in need. Second, Boaz has compassion and leads him to take care of her physical needs. Now, when he's doing this, there's a hint of what's called the where you could glean in the field. And if you go to the Old Testament law, Leviticus 19, 9 through 10, and I should have put that up, or Leviticus 23 through 22, or Deuteronomy 24, 19 to 21, God had told the Israelites in the Old Testament was, as you harvest your field, you're only going to harvest it once. Don't bother trying to catch everything. Leave some behind, so when the poor in your community come, in particular, the widows and the fatherless come through the field, that they would have something for substance, something to help feed them. And Boaz is saying, he's telling her, go ahead, I want you to understand, I'm going to provide for your needs. And so he has had compassion on her needs. He takes action and says, go ahead, glean in the fields. This is what's right. Do this. Now, should not go anywhere to, and he goes on to that she shouldn't go anywhere else. Don't worry, Ruth. You don't have to go into anyone else's field. Stay in my field. I will take care of your need. I'll provide for your needs. Don't worry. Stay here. You'll be good here. And as you see, it's out of his compassion for her, a compassion for those in need. And as godly men, we are to have compassion and mercy for those who are going through hard, difficult times. Often the image of manhood in movies and TV shows, and sometimes being raised by our fathers, is not a compassionate image, but instead of a very stoic, and I will not cry, and nothing's going to bother me, and instead, that's not the image we get in the Bible. The image of the Bible is men should have compassion for those other people. And in fact, Jesus was a man of compassion. God himself is described as a compassionate God. And therefore, if God and Jesus is described as being compassionate, we as men should have compassion for those around us, not only just for our needy, but for our own family and kids. Our kids need to see, and our wives need to see, that we have compassion and mercy and grace. And this is the image we're getting from Boaz. He's a very compassionate man. Not only is he a compassionate, but he's a protector. He's a protector. And in verse 9 it says, let your eyes be on the field which they reap. Go after them and go after them. Indeed, I have commanded the young men not to touch you. And if you are thirsty, go to the water jars and drink from what the young women draw. And as we can see, that his compassion for Ruth has led him to be a protector. And you say, what are you talking about? Why protector? Well, first of all, if she went to another field, remember, she's a foreigner. She's not a foreigner. She's from a pagan nation outside of Israel. And if she went to glean another field, other lesser landowners might harass her or even take advantage of her. And by him saying, stay here, he's protecting her from those who might take advantage of her situation. And not only that, but he even does that with his own men. Now, you notice it says, I've commanded the men to touch you. Many scholars believe the reason why he said that was because they had either been rough with her or harassed her and stuff. And he says, don't worry, I've dealt with them. It'll be safe. And so he's creating this safe area where she feels safe, she feels protected, and as we see, even provided for. This, he is a protector. And as men, we are to be a protector of our family. Our family should feel safe in our care. Our family should feel no worry about what's going to happen. We have a husband, we have a father who's going to protect us from whatever is out there. And that is what he does here. And that is what we should be. Now, we need men in the world who will protect those who are vulnerable in society. We need men who stand up for what's right. And that is why, to some degree, is why first responders in the military are called to do this. They do this. And when we remember Memorial Day and what these men did, they were acting a godly character of being a protector for those in need. They were being a protector for our freedom. They were being a protector for our country. And so one of the characters, as we celebrate Memorial Day, is a protector of our nation. And this is a character of a godly man. A godly man should protect those under his care. Now, it's interesting now, Ruth, after all this, what you need to understand, he's lavishing on Ruth here. And she is shocked because she didn't expect it. She's a foreigner. And instead, she asked him, she fell on her face, bowed to the ground, and said to him, "Why have you found favor in my sight that you should take notice of me, that I am a foreigner?" No, she's humble, she's falling down, she's shocked. What's going on here? She was expecting to go in his field. She was prepared for some people to harass her. She was ready for people to kick her. She was prepared for maybe just him handing out the bare minimum. But instead, he does the exact opposite. He's extravagant at helping her and protecting her and having compassion on her. He is being a godly man, and she is shocked. This is different. I have never seen this before. And I want you to understand, that is what the world needs. When we live out our Christian life different, people take notice. When they see that we are changed by the Christ, we've been changed by the gospel, when we live out our life boldly, people should take notice and say, what is different about them? What makes them tick? They're so loving. They're so protecting. They have compassion. They have mercy. They're servant leaders. What makes this person different? And you say, it's because of the gospel. It's because of what Jesus did in my life. And this is what she's seeing. There's something different. And men, there should be something different in us when people look at us. They should see we have been changed by the gospel. Next characteristic, faith in God. He has a faith in God. It's a particular faith in God because it's who God is. How does God respond? Verse 11, Boaz replies to her, "All that you have done for your mother-in-law and after the death of your husband has been fully told to me, and how you forsook your father and your mother and the land of your birth and came to people that you did not previously know." Now we got to talk about this a little bit before we talk about God's character. We see the reason for his action. He is amazed, as she is amazed by Boaz's character. And we'll learn more about his character, but amazed by his character. Boaz is amazed by her character. Her character who would be loyal to Naomi when it would have been easier to stay home with her parents. She's loyal. She forsakes her people and her God to become a person in Israel, to take Yahweh as her God. And her character is amazing. And it reminds me that as 1 Timothy 2:9-10 says, that a woman's beauty is not in what she wears or what she puts in her hair or her makeup, but is in her character. What is her godly character? Her godly character is what be attractive to us. Godly character is attractive. And part of the reason is at some point, some of us are not prepared to let go of it, looks fade. you get older. And if a woman or man relies on their good looks, and this is how I attract people, at some point, that all goes away, right? We all fall apart. The knees creak a little bit. The hair becomes more white or slowly goes away. And that should not be what attracts us. What should attract us is godly character. Godly character, which is truly attractive. And that is what we should look for in our spouses. And we should try to do to our spouse. We should live out our godly character to our spouse, to our kids. That's what we should want our kids. We want them to be godly. In the Bay Area, they're so focused on education. Not that education is bad. I love education. I love college. I love Joshua College. But if it comes between godly character and going to college, I want him to have godly character. Amen? That is what we want. Go in verse 12 then. What does he have to say about Yahweh? May Yahweh fully repay your work, and may your wages be full from Yahweh, the God of Israel, under whose wing you have come to seek refuge. And these three statements, we learn a lot about what Boaz understands about Yahweh, his God. What does he know about God's character? First, he believes God is just. He believes he's just in a sense that her good deeds will be rewarded. God will reward. It's the just thing to do for her. She's been loyal to Naomi. She's been faithful. She's worked hard to love him. And he says, God will repay you and will reward you for your good character. God is just that way. But not only that, but he also believes God is gracious. Because not only does he say God will repay you, but he will repay you fully or completely or wholly. It is filling up of the cup all the way up to the brim. Fully fill it. Not just a little repay you, but completely fill it. And so he understands God is a gracious God that is overabundance will provide for her. He also believes God is merciful because this is a Moabite woman. She comes from Moab. She had worshiped pagan gods. But now she has repented. She has come to the land of Israel and says, your God will be my God. And in this scene, Boaz is declaring, you are no longer a Moabite. You are now a child of God. You have said, you have been changed, and you have seeked under his wing. You've come under God's wing, and he will protect you. He will be your God. Isn't it amazing? It is, we see this image of a perfect image of the gospel, God who's just. We see a God who's gracious, a God who's merciful, a God that will redeem anyone. Even someone in that culture that was saw unredeemable, God redeems them, and it's just like that. It's instantaneous. She doesn't earn it. She doesn't work it. Is that she sought God, and God accepted her. It's that simple. Repent and to believe, and you will be a child of God. You will be accepted. Men, how do we see God will affect how we treat others? You see, Boaz had a certain understanding that God is a just God, a merciful God, a gracious God, a compassionate God. And because that is who God is, that is how he treats other people. The way he saw God, he wanted to reflect in his life with other people. Like Jesus did. Jesus reflects the Father, and he lives that way, and he treats people that way. And when we've been changed and transformed by the gospel, it should affect how we see it. It reminds you of the woman who was washing Jesus' feet, and the Pharisees like, why are you doing that? And Jesus eventually says, well, he who has been forgiven much loves much. And when you realize what Jesus has done for you, when you realize his character, you realize how much he's forgiven you, you love much, and it changes every aspect of your life, and how you see people and how you treat people is how we see God. This is important. Now, she then again says in verse 13, may I find favor in your eyes, my Lord, for you have comforted me, and indeed have spoken to my heart of your servant woman, though I am not like one of your servant women. And again, you see this humble. She realized she doesn't deserve this. She hasn't earned it. She realized she's not part of God's original people. And tell you the truth, beloved, that was us. If we were to picture ourselves in the book of Ruth, we're like Ruth. We are like Naomi. I mean, Naomi would technically be more like Israel, and Ruth would be more like the Gentiles, and we are Gentiles. I don't think any of us are Israelites in here. But we would be like Ruth. We are someone who was not a child of God, who wasn't born in the covenant promise. We are outside the covenant promise law, and we have no rights to say, God, forgive us. God, let's enter. No, we have no right. And so when we realize God has forgiven us and has redeemed us and brought us close and brought us near, it humbles us. We say, God, I don't deserve this. Why would you do this to me, God? And you see her relationship with Boaz is this relationship. It gives us this image of what happens in our own life. And that should be what happens when people see our love and comfort towards them. It should surprise them. It should shock them. Hospitality. The next godly character is hospitable. He's hospitable because he could have just did what he did, and that would have been fine. That would have been impressive by itself. He would have been amazed in that. But he goes further. It says in verse 14, that mealtime Boaz said to her, come here. Did you may eat of the bread and dip your piece of bread in the vinegar? By the way, what they're talking about is like a flat bread, like hummus, or maybe wine or something, but some flat bread and something to eat. So she said, besides the reaper, so she sat beside the reapers, and she served her roasted grain. And he served her roasted grain, and she ate and was satisfied and had some left. You don't understand how he continues to bring her closer and closer, just like God did for us, bring us closer and closer. In this culture, at this time, this would have been unthinkable. To bring a Gentile in with them and to give her food, it would be mind-blowing. This is hospitality that goes beyond what would have been expected. Ideally, what would have been expected is she would have showed up with her own food and water, worked the field, went home, and he wouldn't have had to provide anything. He was already doing the bare minimum, which was, here, you glean from my field. But he keeps on lavishly blessing her. And he says, come here, have some food. Not only does he say, have some food, here, I'm going to serve you food. I mean, imagine that. That you feel worthless, you feel meaningless, and here's this man that is continuing to love on you and serve you and take care of you. And that's what God does for us. And a godly man is hospitable to family, friends, neighbors, coworkers. We should be willing to open out our houses, our tables for other people. And not just the friends that we have, and not just our families that we have, but people who maybe are just new. Maybe they're just acquaintances. But we want to lavishly welcome people. It's one of the things I said, the church is a great church family, and we should want to bring other people into our church family. It is a family, it is our special church family, but we are always eager to bring new people into the church. And we want people to find Jesus Christ as our Savior. We want to see them redeemed. And we anxiously want them to become of our church family so we can love and nurture and lavish on them, as Boaz does to Ruth. And we should want to be hospitable to our family, and again, that sometimes we so focus on other people that we forget to be loving to our own family, to be hospitable to our own family, to our own kids. Sometimes we're caught up in our own lives. Not only is he hospitable, but then he's generous, lavishly so. If he hasn't been generous already, oh goodness gracious, he goes to the next level. Verse 15, then she rose to glean, and Boaz commanded his young man, come here, let her glean even among the sheaves, and do not dishonor her. As you shall purposely pull out for her some grain from the bundles and leave it, that she may glean, and do not rebuke her. So she gleaned in the field until evening, and then she beat out what she had gleaned, and it was about an ephah of barley. He is now going abundantly gracious. He's overflowing with grace. Remember what I told you about gleaning in the field. They would just pick over the scraps that the harvesters missed. Just a little bit. So it would provide for the daily needs. But now he's not even just doing that. He tells them, imagine you have a bundle of grain that they've already picked and cut and wrapped up and ready for them to go through. He says, oh, take a couple of those sheaves out, leave it for her. And he has said, don't bother her, don't harass her, just go ahead, leave her more. And this is important. It talks about an ephah of barley. A lot of us like, that's nice, Pastor. What's an ephah of barley? About 21 quarts or 23 liters of grain, which would have, in that time, would have sustained her for a week. If she stays for the whole harvest, she'll probably have enough for the whole year. He is lavishly taking care of all her needs beyond what would have been expected of him. It would have only been expected to provide just enough grain for her daily needs. But he provides for this one day, for a week. Remember, he says, stay for the whole harvest. She'll have more than she needs. He's going beyond what the Old Testament law expects, and generous is generous. And I believe the reason Boaz could be so generous, what makes a man that generous? What makes a man so generous is because he has seen how generous God has been in his life. He says, how blessed am I? I have a house. I have food. I am, in that case, a child of Israel. I have these servants. I have this household. I have clothing. I have all my needs. And he sees how God has generously blessed him. And when he sees how much God has blessed him, he is more willing to bless others. And if you want to learn how to be more generous, the first step is to be thankful for what God has given you. When was the last time you just took the time to think about, thank God for the simple things? Maybe your clothes, your shoes, water, a toilet, shower, your children. Think about all the ways you have been blessed by God, that God has been generous to you. And guess what? He doesn't have to give you any of that. You haven't earned any of it. God just richly blesses you because he wants to be a blessing to you. And when you learn that all the small things in life is such a blessing, you learn now how to be a blessing to others because you want to follow the example of your Father, because if he has been generous to you, who are you not to be generous to others? Now, we're already getting short in time. I want to just move this forward. But this is a characteristic we want to see. It's one of the things your kids want to see. They want to see you're generous. If you want your kids to be generous, you should be generous. If you want to see your wife be generous, you should be generous. We want to be the example to others, and they will learn to follow. Let me just close this up. We see there are 7 characters of a godly man who traits affects our worship of God, our witness in the world, and our relationship to God. And the 7 traits were God-honoring leader, compassionate, protector, faith in God, hospitable, and generous. These are 7 characters of a godly man. Now it's not doesn't cover all of it. We could definitely add more to this list. Don't get me wrong, but this is a good list. Not only is it a good list, but it breaks all our misconceptions about what a man is. It's different than we expect. If I could sum it all up in one sentence, I would say, a godly man is a faithful man of God who honors God. Is a God-honoring leader that is compassionate, protecting, hospitable, and generous to others. A godly man is a faithful, God-honoring leader that is compassionate, protecting, hospitable, and generous to others. That is what a God-honoring man is. These godly men are the kind of men that God uses. If you want to be someone that God can use, these are the characteristics that you should have. It's the characteristics that God is building in you. It's one of the things that the Holy Spirit is working in you to develop these traits. And maybe as you look through these lists, you're like, I don't know, maybe I'm okay with this area, but I don't know about this. I can be generous, but a leader? I don't know if I could be a leader. And if you're not sure if you could be a leader in your realm of influence, pray to God. He'll give you wisdom and discernment and how that could be. But these are traits that a godly man should have. It is an honorable men like this that make this country great and can make our country great again. If we want to see this country change, we need to be God-honoring men and creating God-honoring men who love their wives and love their children and help lead this country in a God-honoring way. Be the godly man that God is calling you to be. Are you ready to be the godly man God is calling you to be?
If you like these videos, please like, share, subscribe, and ring that bell. God bless you, and have a great day.